Supposedly, school years were considered to be the best years of your life. But were they really? Who remembers their school years? Some people remembered them fondly, while others thought of them as a chore and couldn't wait to leave school at 16 and start working. Today, we're revisiting UK secondary schools of the 1970s, a time when education was completely different to now. Whether you were a student back then, or just curious about how things have changed, you're in for a treat. So, grab your lunchboxes, get ready to relive the school days, and let's dive in. First up, let's talk about the classroom environment. Imagine stepping into a 1970s classroom. The first thing that hits you is the smell of chalk dust and pencil shavings, wooden desks, each with its own storage space under the lid, lined up in military precision. And the teacher stood at the front, reigning supreme. Blackboards were the norm, and the sound of chalk scraping on the board is still etched into many people's memories. No whiteboards, no fancy smart screens, just pure, unadulterated chalk and talk. And let's not forget about those infamous overhead projectors. You knew it was going to be a good day when the teacher wheeled one of those into the classroom. And sometimes, if you were really lucky, you'd get to watch an educational film. That meant the room lights went off, and suddenly, everyone would start whispering or throwing paper airplanes while the teacher fiddled with the projector. Fashion was also, of course, a major part of 1970s school experience. Unlike American schools, we had to wear a uniform, so no bell-bottom jeans for us. But platform shoes and big bouncy hair were acceptable, and students loved expressing themselves any way they could. Fashion was also significantly influenced by the rise of punk rock, which shook the foundations of the music industry and had a profound impact on youth culture. Suddenly, students had a new way of expressing themselves, and it was all about rebellion, non-conformity, and creativity, which spilled into the way a classroom of children dressed and looked in that era. Now, let's talk about the teachers. Oh yes, the teachers of the 70s had a bit of a reputation, didn't they? Discipline back then was incredibly strict. Corporal punishment was still a thing, and detentions were dished out left, right, and center. It was a far cry from the more relaxed, student-centered approach we see in schools today. But here's the thing. While teachers were very strict, they were also incredibly dedicated. Teachers back then really believed in setting you up for life. They taught respect and responsibility, and many of them would share stories from their own school days, offering advice and life lessons in between spelling tests and science experiments. There was also an interesting divide. The older teachers were often more traditional and strict, while the younger, more recently trained teachers brought a new, slightly more relaxed style of teaching. You could definitely tell who had been teaching since the 50s and who was fresh out of training college. Next, let's talk about the subjects. Subjects like maths, English, and science were the staples of the curriculum, and students were encouraged to pursue more traditional academic routes. But it wasn't all about the 3 R's. Music, art, and drama were also gaining popularity around this time and helped students express themselves in new and exciting ways. Drama classes were where we learned to shed our shyness, playing various roles in school plays that our parents pretended to enjoy. But the curriculum wasn't the same for everyone. Girls were often steered towards home economics and needlework, while the boys headed to woodwork and metalwork. It was a time when gender roles were still very much in play, though some girls secretly envied the boys making cool stuff in metal shop, and the boys often wished they could make cakes in home economics. The 1970s was a decade of great change, and UK secondary schools were no exception. One of the biggest challenges students faced was limited resources. I mean, we're talking about a time when calculators were a luxury and computers were virtually unheard of. Students had to rely on their math skills and mental arithmetic to get by. That being said, one key moment that stands out in many people's memories is the introduction of the Microsoft Altair 8800 microcomputer in 1975. It was the first commercially successful personal computer, and it opened up a whole new world of possibilities for students. Break time and lunchtime. The moments of freedom every student lived for. Stepping outside of those stuffy classrooms, we finally got to hang out with friends and enjoy some fresh air. Or at least fresh-ish, depending on how close you were to the bike sheds where a few naughty kids were sneaking a quick smoke. And then of course there were the societal changes that were shaping education. The 1970s saw a rise of comprehensive schools which aimed to provide a more inclusive, non-selective education for all. It was a time of great experimentation and students were at the forefront of it all. Secondary school playgrounds were a social jungle with very clear groups. The clever kids could usually be found in the library, quietly getting a head start on homework while everyone else played. Then you had the shy kids, hanging around the edges of the playground, observing, but rarely jumping into the action. And of course, there were the naughty kids, who were either plotting their next prank or disappearing behind those bike sheds. But no matter which group you belonged to, rich or poor, clever or rebellious, there was something about break time that brought everyone together. Whether it was swapping stickers or arguing over who was the best at football, the playground was where friendships were forged. Many of us either walked to school or took the school bus. No helicopter parenting back then, no parents dropping us off or picking us up unless it was an absolute emergency. We'd dawdle on the way home, trying to squeeze out as much time with our mates as possible. Sometimes we'd stop off at the local shop to spend our pocket money on sweets, or, for the rebellious ones, a pack of 10 No. 6 cigarettes. Yes, many of us were latchkey kids. Both parents were often at work, so it was just us in the house until someone came home. We'd raid the cupboards, throw our school bags to one side, and put off homework until the very last minute. But despite these challenges, students managed to thrive. They developed resilience, resourcefulness, and a strong sense of community, all of which helped them navigate the ups and downs of school life. And let's be honest, school wasn't all about studying. Some of the most memorable school events were, naturally, the sports days. Inter-house competition, cross-country runs, rain or shine, you still had to do it. And who can forget about school discos, which are now called school proms? They were usually held at the end of the school year, but we did have a weekly youth club where we could hang out with friends and stay out a bit longer than usual. It was about the friendships, the laughter, the mischief, and the memories we created in between lessons and after school. From trying to sneak sweets into the classroom to planning after-school adventures, the friendships we made in those years shaped our lives in ways we're still discovering today. The 1970s was also a time of great cultural shift, and students were at the forefront of it all. The women's liberation movement, the anti-apartheid movement, and the Green Movement were all gaining momentum, and students were eager to get involved. Finally, let's dive into a topic that sparks memories for many: school dinners. School meals in the 70s were a very unique experience. They cost about 15 pence a day, and the menu was pretty predictable. Every week, it was the same rotation, and there were always some highlights, like liver and onions, that would make even the toughest kids cringe. Who could forget semolina for dessert? Not exactly a crowd favorite. But there were always those classic favorites. The smell of chips would get the dining hall buzzing. Some kids would opt for packed lunches though, sandwiches, crisps, maybe a penguin bar. And some kids would spend their lunch money elsewhere, at the local newsagents, picking up crisps, chocolate, or even that sneaky pack of cigs. Despite the grumbling, we survived those school meals, and they became a part of the shared experience. Liver and onions may not have been the highlight of anyone's week, but it's funny how even the most questionable school dinners hold a special place in our memories now. The 1970s UK secondary school experience was a complex, vibrant, and sometimes challenging time, but it was also an era of great creativity, innovation, and change. As we reflect on those experiences, it's clear that they played a significant role in shaping the generation that grew up during that time. It was a simpler time, yet so full of memorable experiences. Some we hated at the time, but look back on fondly today. I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane with me. If you've got your own school memories from the 1970s, I'd love to hear them. Please share them in the comments below, and don't forget to check out another nostalgia-themed video on my channel. Thanks for watching.